To start out, I want to thank all the new subscribers that I got on YouTube. And if you're new to the channel, I encourage you to subscribe and follow me on this journey. I've also made a website, tinyhousecustoms.com, as well as a Facebook Tiny House Customs, an Instagram Tiny House Customs, so you can follow me on all those, as well as check out the website. The hardest part about actually building your tiny house can be figuring the rafters. Everyone can build a square, but a triangle can be a bit more challenging. In this video, I'm going to discuss everything pertaining to a tiny house roof. I'll walk you through the process of figuring rafters. I'll also be adding a few framing terminology definitions to the bottom of the screen, which you can pause the video at any time to read. So let's figure the total width of my tiny house. As you can see from this picture, in between the two wheel wells is 82 inches, or 6'10". Now, since I want a little insulation on each fender wall, I'm going to minus a ½ inch on each side for a total of 6'9". Now let's add two 2x4 walls for a total of 7 inches, plus a ½ inch plywood on each side for another inch for 8 inches. Add the 8 inches for a total of 7'5" from outside to outside. I now need to decide what pitch or angle I want to do on my roof. On my model, I plan to do a 5 pitch, which is a 22.5 degree, and a 12 pitch, which equals a 45 degree. There's two terminologies we need to know: run and rise. A run is how far it travels in a horizontal plane, and rise is how far it travels in a vertical plane. A 12 pitch means for every 12 inches you travel horizontally, you travel 12 inches vertically, which equals a 45 degree. A 5 pitch is similar to that. You travel horizontally 12 inches and vertically 5 inches, and that gives you a 22.5 degree angle. Now let's take that 7'5", which is our total length from outside to outside, and cut it in half so we can figure out our total run. So 7'5" divided by 2 is 3'8.5". On a 12 pitch, if I travel 3'8.5" horizontally, I'm going to travel 3'8.5" vertically. So in the Build Calc app, I can put 3'8.5" into the run, also enter a 45 or a 22.5 and hit the pitch key. You can also hit 12 inch or 5 inch and hit the pitch key. If you double tap the pitch key, it will confirm that you entered everything correctly, which will give me my rise as well as my diagonal. On a 45 degree pitch, it equals a diagonal of 5'2" and 15/16. Now, since I got a double 2x6 ridge going in, I'm going to need to minus 1.5 inches off that diagonal. To better explain why I'm minusing half the thickness of the ridge, it's because when we figure the total length of our diagonal, it actually comes to a point right here. And we need to minus so that the ridge can fit in there. When you minus half the thickness of the ridge, you want to do it in a horizontal plane. To make rafters, you're going to need a framing square. All you need to worry about are the numbers located on the outside of the framing square. If you wanted to mark a 12 pitch, you would hold 12 and 12 inches. So when I say hold 12 inches, you want the 12 inch to intersect with the 2x4 right where that is. And on the other side, you want the same thing. And what that'll do is create a 45 degree angle. If you wanted to make a 5 pitch, you would hold 12 and 5, which would give you your two angles you need. The 5 side will represent a 22.5 degree, and the 12 side will represent a 67.5 degree, which will be the cut that sits on top of the wall, located right here. I'm going to mark a 5 pitch rafter. So we take our framing square, we hold 12 and 5 inches, and we mark the 5 side, which will be our plumb cut. After you mark your plumb cut, you want to transfer a small mark up to the top of the rafter. I'll hold my tape measure on that mark. Now my diagonal is going to be 4 foot 3/16. So I'll make a mark on top of the board like that. On that mark I just made, I want to hold 5 and 12 and mark another plumb cut. This is where our seat cut will be located. I'm going to measure down from the top of the rafter to establish where that seat cut will begin. To keep my seat cut depth the same on both my 5 pitch and my 12 pitch, I've established that 1.75 inches from the top of the rafter down would be a good spot to put my seat cut. That 1.75 inches is important to keep in mind for later when we figure our wall heights. Now again, I'm going to hold 12 and 5, and I'm going to place this square so that the 67.5 degree angle is intersecting with that mark that I made at 1.75 inches, and I'll mark that across. And this will become my seat cut. Once you're done marking your rafter, you want to cut it, making sure to be as precise as possible, and then label it pattern and use it to trace all your rafters. Since roofs are affected by this strange phenomenon called gravity, they're always trying to fall flat. In a tiny house, there's typically no collar ties or ceiling joists to keep the walls in, which adds to structural rigidity to the building. If I would remove these collar ties and ceiling joists, the walls would want to bow out. So in a tiny house, you want that open feeling, you have to remove the ceiling joists and collar ties. We need to add some kind of structural support. So on the tiny house, we add a structural ridge. A structural ridge is either two 2x6s or 2x8s glued and nailed together. In my tiny house, I plan on gluing two 2x6 20-footers together to create my structural ridge. I'm adding a very small collar tie, which will just be an 1.5 inch rip. I'll probably put one on both sides of the rafters and bolt that together. It'll also give me a spot to run wires through so that I'm not drilling into my ridge. If you were to drill into your ridge, you would be taking away a substantial amount of structural support. Now let's talk about the tail, or the overhang. The tail is the section which would support a fascia and a soffit. So what we have here is the rafter coming down to your plumb cut, and the tail would be from this point out, which would be your overhang. My total building width is 7'5", and my max width can be 8'6", which gives me 1'1" to split between both sides for a total of a 6.5 inch overhang. Now you need to minus the thickness of the fascia board at 3/4 inch, as well as the roofing drip edge at roughly 1 inch, which would give you 4 3/4. To figure the length of this diagonal, you would figure the same way that you would figure the length of the rafter. You would add 4 3/4 inches into your run, enter your 45-degree pitch, which would give you your diagonal of 6 11/16. If you plan on putting gutters on your tiny house, you can take that into consideration while you're figuring your overhang. Figuring rafters goes all the way back to the Pythagorean theorem. I might have said that wrong, but what it is a squared plus b squares equals c squares. Your run would be a, your rise would be b, and your diagonal would be c. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Then all you have to do is find the square root of that number. If you don't want to buy the BuildCalc app, there's free services online. You can just Google build calculator or framing calculator. I literally just scratched the surface on determining rafters, but I'll be touching back on this topic in future videos. In my next video, I'm going to go over how to figure out your wall height, which is much easier than figuring rafters. If you have suggestions for future videos, leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps others find their way to the video. Pitch or angle or what or what. Why don't you just read what you wrote? For a total of, gotcha, shouldn't have went there. Oh, I just threw up in my mouth. You gotta do this. I don't know. I mean, there's words probably to explain how to do it. Didn't mean that. In this video, too much laughter. In this video, I'm going to talk about you're laughing. You're done. You're done. Game over. To make a route of the framing square, I'm going to beat your definitions to the bottom of the speech. Come on. Really? This video has made my apartment a complete mess. I am living in a very small apartment, and I literally built a tiny house in my apartment. My couch is in my kitchen. My kitchen is in my couch. It's a mess. Figuring rafters all goes back to the Pythagorean theory. Does that make sense? No? Okay. Total time spent on this video, 40+ hours. Believe it. Hit the subscribe button. Thank you.